Right now, our planet is being reshaped by wars, environmental disasters, political unrest, and humanitarian crises so severe that they will go down in history, if history remembers them at all. The strange thing is, most of these events get little to no coverage in mainstream news. They're overshadowed by celebrity gossip, short political sound bites, or whatever topic is trending online that week. But just because we are not hearing about them does not mean they are not happening. They are. And for millions of people, these aren't just headlines, they're life and death. 1. The Sudan Civil War. On April 15, 2023, Sudan was thrown into chaos. Two military forces that once ruled together, the Sudanese Armed Forces, SAF, and the Paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, RSF, turned their guns on each other. This wasn't a war between strangers. It was a war between former allies, born out of distrust after a coup in 2021. They were supposed to merge into one army, but neither trusted the other, and when the RSF launched a surprise attack on key sites in Sudan's capital, Khartoum, the country plunged into full-scale war. The fighting didn't stay in Khartoum. It ripped through the country, with Darfur becoming a nightmare of reported ethnic massacres and mass killings. International powers picked sides. Egypt backs the SAF. The UAE and Chad are believed to back the RSF. Peace talks like the Jeddah Declaration failed, and while the world looked away, the country fell apart. 18 million people face extreme hunger. 500,000 children are at risk of starving to death. 8.8 million have fled their homes. 3.5 million have left the country entirely. Aid groups can't deliver help safely because convoys are looted. Hospitals are shut down. And on social media, both sides wage a separate war, using fake videos and even AI-generated images to twist public opinion. 2. The Rwanda Congo War. This war's roots stretch back over 30 years. In 1994, the Rwandan genocide killed roughly 500,000 Tutsis in just 100 days. The perpetrators fled into what is now the Democratic Republic of Congo, regrouping into militias like the FDLR. Rwanda's new government, led by the very people who survived the genocide, pursued them, sparking decades of regional instability. Today, the violence is back in the headlines of UN briefings, but rarely on TV. Rwanda is accused, with evidence from both the UN and the US, of supporting the M23 rebel group, a force made mostly of Congolese Tutsis. Officially, Rwanda denies this. They claim they are only defending themselves from the FDLR. But the truth is complicated. M23 says they're protecting Tutsis in Congo. Yet they're also accused of massacres, recruiting child soldiers, and attacking aid workers. Since the fighting intensified in 2022, whole towns have fallen to rebel forces. In the first few months of 2025 alone, over 400,000 people were displaced, and thousands were killed or wounded. It's not just a war, it's a tangled web of history, ethnicity, revenge, and geopolitics. And it's happening right now, largely unnoticed. 3. The Myambo woodlands crisis in southern Africa, one of the planet's largest and most important ecosystems, is being erased in silence. The Myambo woodlands, stretching across Tanzania, Zambia, Congo, and beyond, are home to lions, elephants, and critically endangered species found nowhere else on Earth. Yet every single day, the equivalent of 140 full-sized football fields of this woodland is destroyed. Fires, often lit for charcoal production or farming, rip through the land. The animals die or flee. The trees, which store huge amounts of carbon, go up in smoke, adding greenhouse gases to the atmosphere. Over 65 million people depend on these woodlands for food, timber, fuel, honey, and medicine. But because they aren't as famous as the Amazon or the Congo rainforest, the Myambo crisis gets almost no global attention. There's no billion-dollar international campaign to save it. And without it, Africa could lose one of its last great biodiversity strongholds. 4. The Uyghur persecution in China and Xinjiang. China, an entire ethnic group, the Uyghur Muslims, is facing what human rights organizations call cultural genocide. Over 1 million people have been detained in so-called re-education centers. Their crimes? Sometimes as simple as praying, growing a beard, wearing traditional clothing, or contacting relatives abroad. Inside these camps, survivors report forced labor, political indoctrination, and torture. Women speak of sterilizations and forced birth control, part of a campaign to reduce the Uyghur population. Even outside the camps, life is suffocating. Homes are monitored by cameras, and in some cases, Han Chinese government-assigned guests live inside Uyghur households to watch and report on them. Whole families are torn apart, with children sent to state-run boarding schools far from their parents. The Chinese government calls it counterterrorism and poverty alleviation. But leaked documents, satellite imagery, and survivor accounts tell another story, one the world rarely hears about because China tightly controls the flow of information. 5. Haiti's collapse into chaos. Haiti's crisis didn't start overnight. It's been brewing since 2018, when protests erupted over a spike in fuel prices. But after President Jovenel Moïse was assassinated in 2021, the country entered a free fall. The capital, Port-au-Prince, is now largely controlled by armed gangs. In 2025, Prime Minister Ariel Henry traveled abroad to negotiate for foreign police support. While he was gone, gangs blocked his return and launched coordinated attacks, storming prisons, freeing thousands of inmates, and taking over key infrastructure like ports and airports. The humanitarian situation is horrific. Half the population is going hungry. 1.66 million people are on the edge of famine. 160,000 people have been forced from their homes in the capital alone. Between January and March 2025, 1,600 people were killed and 800 injured in gang violence. And yet, unless you go looking for this story, you'd never know an entire country is collapsing in real time. 6. Europe's silent insect apocalypse. From 1989 to 2016, German scientists quietly measured insect populations in nature reserves. They did not realize they were documenting one of Europe's biggest environmental disasters, a 75% decline in flying insects in less than 30 years. Why does this matter? Insects pollinate 80% of wild plants. They feed 60% of bird species. They break down organic matter, recycle nutrients, and keep ecosystems alive. Without them, food chains collapse. Scientists blame industrial farming, habitat loss, and pesticides like neonicotinoids. Farmers worry that banning these chemicals could make them uncompetitive against countries that still use them. But without insects, farming itself will collapse. 7. Myanmar's Civil War. In 2021, Myanmar's military, known as the Tatmadaw, seized power in a coup, arresting elected leaders and replacing democracy with military rule. Protests erupted, but soldiers responded with live ammunition, mass arrests, and torture. In response, civilians formed armed resistance units called People's Defense Forces, PDFs, joining forces with long-standing ethnic militias. Together, they've seized territory, but the military uses scorched earth tactics, bombing villages, burning crops, and cutting off food and supplies. In April 2023, a single airstrike killed over 160 civilians in one day. Millions are displaced, and a major earthquake in March 2025 killed thousands more, adding to the misery. Yet global attention remains minimal. 8. The Balkan Spring. Since late 2024, a wave of protests, dubbed the Balkan Spring, has swept across Serbia, Slovakia, North Macedonia, Turkey, Greece, Montenegro, and beyond. In Serbia, it began after a newly renovated train station collapsed, killing 16 people, a tragedy blamed on corruption. Students held a silent vigil, only to be attacked by government-linked thugs. That attack lit the fuse. In Slovakia, protests erupted after Prime Minister Robert Fico visited Moscow, cut aid to Ukraine, and pushed controversial judicial reforms. The protests share slogans, tactics, and even symbols, like the Pikachu icon that started in Turkey and spread to Serbia. And while some governments are cracking down, others, like Serbia's, have already been forced into talks of snap elections. These are not small events. They are not background noise. They are reshaping nations, destroying ecosystems, and deciding the futures of millions of people. And yet, for most of us, they are invisible because mainstream media either ignores them or covers them in passing before moving on. If we don't pay attention, history will repeat the same mistakes. The world doesn't change because the truth is hidden. It changes when people see it and demand something better. If you want more untold stories the world ignores, subscribe and share this video. The more people who know, the harder it is for these events to be erased.